Thanks for joining us on Backwoods Pursuit. Today I'm going to show you how I've set up my DIY garage bow shop. I'm going to walk you through each of the tools that I use on a regular basis to work on my bow, as well as a few that I've built that are really cheap to build but really useful when you're working on your own bow here in the garage. If you don't have a big budget to do this, you don't have to. Well, I'm going to show you in this video the things that I've used that are relatively inexpensive, along with stuff that you can build to go along with that to make it really cost effective for you. We're going to walk through each of those. I'll make sure to put a link in the description there for you, so of each of these products, so you can check them out. We'd sure appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button for us as well and follow along. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram, as well as our website backwoodspursuit.com for more great gear reviews. Love the support. Let's go take a look. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do when you're setting up your bow shop is go ahead and make sure that you have enough of a space to where you can build yourself a bit of a workbench. This one is about 10.5 feet long from one end to the other, and I made it about 24 inches deep. This is just made out of 2x4s and some press board, half-inch press board. It was pretty easy to put together if you're a little bit handy with tools. It only took a couple hours to throw this together. So this is the first step to make sure you have enough space and a workbench to go ahead and put that shop together. Next thing I went ahead and did was to add a couple of lights. I had a couple of, probably can't see them very well up there, but a couple of 100-watt light bulbs. Because you need a lot of light when you're doing this to work with the serving and the string. So make sure that you've got plenty of light to go ahead and be able to see what you need. I'm probably actually going to add even one more, because there's times when I get on certain parts of the bench it's a little bit darker than I'd like it. So a lot of light and plenty of space to move the bow around. If I was going to do this again, I might even go a little bit deeper than this, than the 24 inches. I might go 30 or so. It works fine, but it's a little bit deeper might even be better. Alright, so the first tool that you're going to want to consider picking up is a vise. And I don't even remember what brand this one is, but you can pick them up on eBay or online somewhere. They're not that expensive. This whole project of putting this bow shop in my garage, this DIY bow shop, was probably not more than a couple $100 to get started here. You'll add things as you go along, but one of the first things you want to do is pick up a vise. This allows you to, of course, hold your bow in place when you're working on it, and allows you to maneuver the bow so that you can work on the sight or the level when you're putting the sight on, making sure everything is level, getting the string set the way that you need to that way. There's a lot that you use that vise for. So that's going to be one of your first things that you're going to want to consider. You can need a good set of Allen wrenches. These are not terribly expensive ones even. I think they're just from Harbor Freight, but they work fine if you're not doing a ton of work yourself. They work great for just the hobbyist if you're just working on your own stuff. Next piece of gear that you're going to need, or tool that you're going to need, is some kind of bow press. Now, this is just a Bowmaster. This is the 6-inch version, and it's again not terribly expensive, and it works well. It's fine for for this kind of work. If you're going to be doing a lot of bow work, then I would suggest investing in a better press than the Bowmaster press. But this does fine if you're just working on your own bow here and there. It's a little bit cumbersome, and I can show you that in some other videos as far as how that works, but it does work well. It's a little bit more of a process to get it on and off rather than a nicer press, but of course that's a lot less money. I think these run 50 or 60 bucks, and one of those nicer presses, one of those bench presses, is going to run several hundred at least. So a good option there as far as a press to get started. Next thing I've got down here is, this is just an arrow squaring tool. So when I'm building arrows, put some sandpaper here and to square both ends of that arrow, make sure that's flying and flying well, and it just really helps with tuning the arrow. Next thing here, this is my fletching tool. This one is the GT Arrow Fletcher. It gives you a lot of options as far as 3 or 4 fletch, 2, 3, 4-inch vanes. It works pretty well. Had pretty good success with it. I've used in the past the boning, the red boning Fletcher, as well as the easy fletch. Those both worked well also, but this last year I went to a 4 fletch, so I needed something that wasn't a 4. It wasn't just limited to a 3 fletch. So that's a critical piece if you're going to be building arrows. The next tool that I use here is basically, it's in conjunction with that Bowmaster press. Because the Bowmaster is more of a field type use, it's designed more to be portable, so you take it with you when you're out hunting if you need to press your bow for some reason to fix a peep sight or retie some serving or something of that nature. That works great for that. But when you're working with a bow press in your garage like this, I built this to hold my bow in place because there's nothing to hold your bow with the Bowmaster. So the way this works, really simple. I just basically just built this to fit my bow, and then you can make adjustments as you go along. But it's basically designed just to have your bow slide right in there and hold it in place while you're working on it. It's super cheap to make. As you can see, it's 2x4s, and I believe those are 2x10s. Just stuff I had lying around, and then it's just some foam here. That's just some foam from some old military foam pad type thing that I had lying around. That's really all it is. You can measure the length from this side to here compared to your riser on whatever bow you're using to make sure that it fits it well, and it makes sure that it is going to fit with your particular bow. But it's super easy to make, again, really inexpensive. You can probably make it out of the scraps you have lying around your house, a couple of screws. And it's really, really useful when you are using that bow press so that the bow's not wiggling around on you and causing you problems. I definitely recommend doing that if you're going to be using any type of cable press for your work. This is a tool that is not super popular, but I find very useful. It's a center shot tool. Basically, I use it to make sure when I'm setting up my arrow rest that the left and right are set identical to where the nock point is. So you utilize this little button here to mark, and that moves up and down this way like that, and then this moves as well up and down there, and just by loosening this plastic nut there. Basically, that allows you to set this portion on a flat part of the riser or on your rest. Set it here. This is your nock point, and then once you have this little rubber piece set left right to where it perfectly aligns with your nock, you flip it over to the end of, or as far out on your arrow, just by going like that, and then you attach arrow in your rest and make sure that arrow aligns with that little rubber piece. So it allows you to get a really good start on your rest tuning. I find that very useful. Another tool you'll want to consider taking a look at or possibly picking up is something like this. This is just the Carbon Express model of the tool that allows you to set your nock point. Some bows shoot better, 1/8 of an inch nock high versus dead zeroed out. So that allows you to set that right on your rest. Attach this to your string. Make sure that you are setting your nock height appropriate for your bow, and then work from there. It's a good starting point, but a really useful tool again to make sure you're starting off at the right point before you do your fine-tune adjustments for your broadhead tuning. I definitely would recommend picking up one of those for your garage bow shop. Another thing that I found useful is just some kind of system here, some kind of containment for all the little things that you're going to need. So you got field points, got all kinds of D-loop string and string levels, some of those kinds of things. Make your own labels, but real useful to keep things organized, because you have a lot of small parts, a lot of little things that you're going to need as you go along, as you get better at your tuning of your bow. It's just something really useful. Another thing that I've done is just go ahead and put some anchors up on the wall to hang the bows. It's, you know, just something that's real easy, just garage hooks, something that's rubberized, not going to scratch your bow. Just kind of keeps your bows up out of the way. And then finally, another super useful tool is a bow scale. Not a necessity, but it allows you to set your bow weight. Again, they're not terribly expensive either. You can find one like this for not too much money. I can't remember how much that one was. But basically what I did is I just attached that up to a stud in the ceiling with a chain, and allows you to set your draw weight. And as you're working on that to find just the right draw weight for you or for whoever's bow you're working on, that's a really useful tool. You can use that for weighing a lot of other things. If you want to know your pack weight or your weight of any particular piece of gear, that goes to ounces or pounds. So you can use it for a lot of different things, not just for your draw weight of your bow. Here's another tool that I use quite a bit particularly when I'm setting up an arrow. I'm trying to make sure that the weights are matched appropriately. You know, if you're trying to group arrows according to a particular weight, make sure all the broadheads are within a couple of grains of each other. And this is just a grain scale. Again, pretty inexpensive. I think $5 or $10 at Harbor Freight. And you can get one of those, pick them up in there. They do a pretty good job of keeping you accurate. You can toggle between a bunch of different settings, but the main one you need for this kind of thing is just the number of grains for your arrows or for other pieces of equipment, the nocks or the bushings or inserts or those kinds of things. You want to make sure it's all consistent in its weight. Now the next piece of equipment here that I built for my garage bow shop here is a draw board. Now, if this isn't something you're familiar with, I would recommend you to do some research on it, but it's basically a tool that is really useful when you're setting the timing of your rests. You can also check the timing of your cams if you have a bow that has two cams, so you can make sure those are in time. It's really useful to make sure that if you're shooting a drop away rest, that you have that timed properly so that the rest will fall away at the right time. Another useful part of this is it allows you to check your draw length. So if you have your bow set at a particular draw length, you can make sure that the actual length that you're drawing is what you think it is, or is what the bow is saying that it is. So basically all this is a 2x6 and a steel flange with a half-inch steel pipe there. Just wrap that in some electrical tape or something to make a little bit of a soft feel for the grip, so you're not scratching your bow. And then just attach that ruler, a steel ruler, again I think from Harbor Freight. And then this is just a boat winch, again from Harbor Freight. Not expensive to build this. Most of the stuff you have lying around your house, other than the winch here, maybe the steel flange if you don't have one of those. But again, fairly inexpensive to make, but really useful when you're doing work on your bow. Another tool that I would highly recommend picking up is an arrow spinner. I think these are like $20 or so. Again, you don't really need one of these unless you're building arrows, but they are super good to have to spin test your arrows, and particularly spin test your broadheads once you put them on your arrows. Even if you're not building your own arrows, these are nice to have, and it really can tell you if you've got any wobble in your broadhead. If your broadhead is not spinning consistently and it's not spinning perfectly, then you're going to have some erratic flight more than likely with that particular arrow and broadhead combination. So it'd be something that you want to take a look at. This one doesn't have a broadhead on it, but you'll be just watching that broadhead to make sure you don't have any erratic or wobble within that broadhead. Real easy to do, and it's just an eye test. Another thing that I use that probably not everybody's going to want to use is basically a grinder here to sharpen your broadheads. Depending on the broadheads that you use, you may not need that. I use the Valkyries, and I'm shooting the 175 Blood Eagles, and those are broadheads that you can and should sharpen, and you can go ahead and do that if you have a bench grinder like this, just a small one. And then these wheels, this is the Valkyrie sharpening kit that you can pick up from them. Does a wonderful job of just making your broadheads just scary sharp. So that's part of my system, but it may or may not need to be depending on what broadheads you shoot. There's other sharpening systems for other brands of broadheads depending on what you're shooting. So otherwise, just your glue, some extra flashlight, screwdrivers, hex heads, those kinds of things are always useful to have around, and something that you'll want to kind of fine-tune what you use the most and keep that handy, and or stay organized. It's really frustrating to not be able to find what you need when you get to working on your bow, so recommend being as organized as you can. Another tool that I built here, this is getting a little more in-depth in building arrows, but since I've got it here, I'll do a quick video on it. This is basically a spine indexing tool that I built. It wasn't that expensive again to build, just some 1x6 white pine. So just used some roller skate ball bearings and some little L brackets from Home Depot. And basically what your goal is here, do that and they're set about 27 inches apart from one side to the other, or here to there. And then this tracks the consistency of the arrow spine as you spin it around. You can see that moving a little bit as you spin the arrow. And these are some Black Eagle Spartans. They're really straight. I spine index a couple or a dozen or two of those, and they are really, really good. And then you add a 2-pound or so weight in the middle of this arrow right here to identify that the arrow is flexing consistently with the rest of the arrows. That's a whole other video to look at, but this is basically one of the tools I use when I'm building arrows to make sure that the arrows that I'm wanting to use or testing are making sure that they're consistent with one another, so you get good consistent arrow flight. Really helps in reducing the amount of time that you spend on the range trying to get your arrows to fly and your broadheads to fly well. If you know your arrows are straight, you know they're indexing and spining, they're flexing consistently when they're in flight. That's a critical part of your arrow being consistent in its flight, so this can perform for you the way that it's supposed to. But thanks for joining us here today on Backwoods Pursuit, and that's our homemade in-garage bow shop. Hope you found it useful. Hopefully you can take a tip or two maybe away and start building one for yourself, start doing work yourself on your bow.